Hey, what's going on, fantasy sports fans? It's Nick from Razzball, and I'm joined here on Razzball Radio by our first ever in studio guest. I've got Jess Root from Revenge of the Birds. Jess, what's going on, buddy?
Well, for me, it's a huge day. Tomorrow, NFL draft, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, unless you're watching this tomorrow, or you might be watching it tonight, but it is draft day this Thursday night for the National...
Yes, it is.
Dun, 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 dun.
Football League.
Football League. So lots going on. What we're going to talk about today in today's episode, it is me and Josh, the whole show. So if you're a fantasy baseballer tuning in, sorry guys. Tomorrow we have Gray and Sky on the show, so that'll be exciting. But today, Jess and I are going to talk about some of the prospects coming up in the NFL draft that are going to be fantasy relevant, correct?
Absolutely.
Good stuff. And we'll also talk a little bit about storylines. You know, there's a lot to chit-chat about, so let's get on it. And without further ado, let's kind of bust out some of the kind of big news things that are happening right now that's being talked about. One is who might move up, who might move down in the draft. A lot of chatter today that maybe the Bucks might move up. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, with the whole new coaching staff and a new general manager, even though they drafted Mike Glennon a year ago, they're going to want to bring in their guys. As it is, they already brought in Josh McCown, who's going to start for them. If they've got a guy they want to target, particularly at the quarterback position, otherwise, if you're going to move up for a skill player, doesn't make a lot of sense. I would move up for a quarterback if that's the guy that you're targeting. And when you've got a new coach and a new general manager, at the end of the day, you got to have your guy in there for it to make sense.
So who do you think, okay, let's just assume, just for argument's sake, and of course it's a big guessing game right now, if the Bucks do move up to number 2, who are they taking?
If they're going to move, I think there's been a little bit of chatter about Manziel, Johnny Manziel, who's, I think, hands down the most exciting player in this draft. I think that's the guy you pull the trigger for. Blake Bortles, he doesn't move the dial as much for me. Yes, he's got all the physical tools, but if they're going to move up, let's make a splash. Let's go for Johnny Manziel right there at the top of the draft. A lot of guys are down on him. Don't think he's going to last. Nothing in the league is guaranteed anyway, so you got to go for what you can get here in the near future. You can't think 10 years down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you know, I discussed this yesterday with T-Hole when we were talking a little bit about prospects. Johnny Manziel is either going to be a very exciting and successful NFL player or maybe a great Canadian Football League player. But, you know, the more I like the guy's swagger. You know, I don't know. But so since we are talking about Johnny Manziel, let's break into some of the quarterbacks that could be fantasy relevant. And I think, especially when we're talking quarterbacks here, we're talking more dynasty and keeper league players, because Johnny Manziel could be fantasy relevant this year, but I don't think any of the rest of crop of quarterbacks that are out there could be. And even Manziel, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if he could. I'm hoping his legs can make him relevant.
Well, yeah, when it comes to these quarterbacks, a lot of them are going to need a year of seasoning, and it depends on them. Less and less, it's a league of quarterbacks sitting out. I mean, one of the last guys we saw to do that, Aaron Rodgers, sat by, but again, he was behind a Hall of Famer. But he was behind a Hall of Famer,
right? And
there's a reason why. So you see some of these better quarterbacks do that, but they're in special situations. Carson Palmer sat out a whole year.
Right.
That's been a long time now. The trend is now to get your guy out there early. With my work with the Arizona Cardinals, Bruce Arians, their head coach, believes that you don't learn anything with a clipboard when it comes to the quarterback position. You might learn things about offenses, but you don't learn anything about the quarterback position unless you're out on the field, which is why they like to throw guys out there. He wants to get the guys out there early.
But that's what a head coach has to do, because he's got such a short lifespan in the NFL. Hopefully the general manager will steer the ship in a more prudent direction, but I understand what you're saying. The only concern I have, other than whether he flops, is his size and the way he plays. And I don't want to compare him to Michael Vick because they're very different players, but in terms of frame and the way they move, I do have concerns about whether he can stay healthy.
That's the one concern I have about Manziel's future. Personally, I see him having an RG3 type rookie year, but there are things about his game that worry me. But it's the same reason why I like him. When he was on John Gruden's quarterback show, he said, "I'm not afraid," and he said flat, he's not afraid, and that's what you like about it. At the same time, that's what's going to get him hurt, because he's going to take on a linebacker, and these aren't college kids. These are professionals. These are big guys. They're fast, and it might get them hurt. At the same time, that same competitiveness is what you want out of your quarterback. I don't think there's a more competitive guy in this draft, which is why he'll make an impact, I think, day one.
Okay, fair enough. Another quarterback that potentially could, well, there's a few guys that could potentially go in the first round, but one, I don't know that he's going to be fantasy relevant today, but maybe down the road he might be the second best quarterback to come out of this draft, and that would be Blake Bortles, 6'5", 232-pounder out of Central Florida. Big guy, great pocket awareness. Maybe doesn't throw the best deep balls, doesn't have the cannon necessarily you might assume with that kind of arm. Probably not going to be effective this year wherever he winds up unless something strange happens. But how do you project Bortles going future, again, with an eye on Dynasty?
If you look at a guy like Bortles, if you look at his frame, you look at his skill set, because he can move around, it draws a lot of comparisons of Ben Roethlisberger. Because he's a guy that with that sort of frame that can extend plays. He doesn't necessarily have to run 4 yards, but he can extend plays in the pocket and make things happen down the field. In terms of size, you see him kind of as at kind of the top end. You see as a Ben Roethlisberger type of player.
He did have 15 rushing touchdowns too in university. So
yeah.
For a big guy, and it was only like in 195 carries, I think. So, that's. He does have mobility, and so it could play a role in the future. Another guy on the list, obviously, is Teddy Bridgewater, who going into the year, this guy was like the top prospect on the board. It seemed almost unanimous. Bad pro day, a lot of questions about him. My biggest question, again, is durability based on his size. Think he could be a good West Coast type quarterback?
Yes.
Yeah.
West Coast is kind of he's really smart about he's really smart. He's real intelligent when it comes to.
He's really lit up when I said that, Jess.
Yes.
I hit a nerve with you.
Well, yeah, he's a bright guy, so he can understand route concepts. He understands offenses. He understands coverages. He just doesn't move the dial in terms of fan impact.
Right.
But he's a smart guy. He will have an impactful. But if you have to pick a guy out of these top 4 quarterbacks, if you're going to look at the long-term career, if they're going to have the bigger impact, Teddy Bridgewater is the guy you think he's going to have the longest career. He may not be the best out of the 4, but he's going to have a long, successful career because of the football smarts, which in the end, after the athleticism backs off after the first 3 years as a quarterback, it's that field awareness, it's to be able to read coverages and to make the throws that you need.
Yeah, it sounds like a game manager to me, so I don't know if I'm drafting him. One guy I do want to talk about, though, and this is a potential sleeper at the quarterback position, and this is, if you're 2-3 rounds into your dynasty draft, not a lot of guys left on the board, I do want to bring up Garrett Gilbert from SMU, big guy, 6'4", 221, went to Texas. A lot of change over there on the offensive coaching side of the ball. So he transferred to SMU, did pretty good. Interesting prospect. The guy, he was a 5-star recruit.
The one thing that you're going to see out of guys that are going to get drafted late, they are now if you're thinking dynasty, if it doesn't cost you a whole lot, it's not that big a deal. But I think there have only been 2 quarterbacks drafted 5th round or later that have gotten more than 1,000 snaps. John Skelton's one of them. He wasn't very good.
So was Tom Brady.
Tom Brady, exception. Now we're talking since Tom Brady. And if you're banking on a Tom Brady in the 6th round,
I'm just saying, just watch.
He's definitely got the tools. He's got the tools for it.
Who thought Nick Foles would do what he did last year? I'm just saying.
I think only people in Tucson said that was going to happen.
All right, let's get to the much sexier position this year of running back. And running backs changed so much in the NFL. It used to be that it was you'd have 2, 3, 4, 5 guys go in the first round, obviously because they're a lot more expendable now. They don't have the same shelf life that they used to have. You're not getting the same kind of impacts in the first round. With that said, a lot of these 2nd, 3rd, 4th round guys are having impact. So obviously we're going to look at the position a lot differently. Let's start with the guy who probably, I don't want to say will go first, but could go first because he's a big bruiser out of the Ohio State University. Carlos Hyde, 6 foot, 230. What I think is interesting about him, it's so rare in fantasy to find a guy who could be a feature back. Now, year 1, he might be, again, depending on situation, 800 yards. But if he's getting goal line carries and he's in the right offense with that size and the fact, again, he could potentially be a feature back, maybe 6, 7, touchdowns. So he's someone interesting to watch for sure.
Well, and there's something particularly about the running back position is that they're gonna, once you find a guy that's effective, guess what? They're gonna hand them the ball a lot. You're gonna use them because they don't last too terribly long. Carlos Hyde is, if you were a Beanie Wells fan at all coming out of college,
okay.
Carlos Hyde.
I'm listening.
Carlos Hyde is the same type of back with better feet without the injury concerns. So that he's a better pick than Beanie was, because Beanie's durability was his issue, and he tended to slip and fall a lot, but the body frame was there. He was strong and he was fast. Carlos Hyde is going to be the good part of what Beanie Wells could have been.
I don't know. That's I don't want to say it's kind of ambitious. Well, more the Beanie comparison, only because Beanie Wells was. I mean, he was not fast. Maybe he was before all the injuries, but he was. Or excuse me, Beanie did have potential breakaway speed. I don't know if Hyde has that. I don't know. I'm contradicting myself here. So, where do you think he might go?
Hyde, best case scenario, I think you're seeing late second round.
Really, that late? And do you think he's the first running back off the board?
Probably.
And do you think, as of right now, he potentially is the most impactful fantasy running back going into this year?
Actually, they're if you're thinking about a type of feature back, think of a guy, and I recognize a little bit more, so maybe it's a little homerish on my part.
Yep.
Kadeem Carey out of U of A. Now, granted, it's not homer because I like the school. No. But Kadeem Carey, he is a bruiser. He's 5'9", he's 205 pounds. He is a big, durable back. He's the type of guy who can run you over. If you kind of take a look at the kid out of Boston College, only not as well known.
Okay.
And Andre Williams. Kadeem Carey, he's going to be a guy that for 3, 4, 5 years is going to make people hurt.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Where do you think he goes in the draft?
He's going to be a 3rd or 4th rounder, though. I think there are durability concerns, not because of his injuries, but the amount of carries he got in college. So
right.
Kind of like the treads already start to come off. He's
Yep.
starting to warn some of the treads. Late in the season, he had 50 carries in a game.
Hey, Ray Rice had a lot of carries in college.
Yes, he did. And where is he at now?
Wow, he's had a pretty successful career.
He has.
Though.
He has.
That was always my argument of, don't draft Ray Rice, is that just the amount of touches he had. Well, people are like, well, he was in a timeshare his first couple of years. Yeah, but look how much he carried the ball at Rutgers. So, okay, another guy, and this guy's interesting because he was the SEC Player of the Year for Auburn. Trey Mason, 5'8", 210, had a huge BCS title game against Florida State. I think he ran for 195 yards. What's interesting about this guy, I don't know how many touches he'll get in the NFL because, again, he's only 5'8", but he's really well built. Reminds me a little bit of Andre Ellington. I'm not trying to tie this too much into Arizona here, but really that's what I was thinking, watching some of his game tape. Trey Mason, what do you think about him?
Trey Mason is a guy, is actually a player that some of the guys I know are a little bit down on because you have to take into consideration his time in Auburn. Who did he play behind? He played one of the best offensive lines in the country.
That's fair.
And so he does do the running. He's patient. He's got vision. But the other parts of the game, when you compare Andre Ellington, he doesn't have that other element of the game when it comes to in the passing game. Well, Ellington didn't have that skill, I think, coming in.
Yep.
I forget about that. Ellington
Ellington went in the 5th round last year, right?
He went 6th round.
6th round.
6th round. He went 6th round, and he hadn't played the receiver position, but he played a lot of receiver in Arizona. So Trey Mason is a guy that has the upside, but at the same time, he's got to be with a team that has a strong line in front of him.
I'm not disagreeing with that point, but here's my counter to that, is that you're still going against these SEC defenses.
That's true.
We're not talking the Mid-American Conference with all due respect.
No, you're not.
So, no, he's going to be an interesting guy to watch. So, Trey Mason, another guy to keep an eye on. We spoke yesterday at length, T-Hole and I did, about Bishop Sankey out of Washington, who just annihilated the Combine. Very impressive performance at the Combine. Won't go too much into him, but had a nice career at Washington. Maybe late 2nd, early 3rd round for Sankey.
He's a 3rd round guy that I would project, and he's got the skill set as well. And he's got. I saw him completely run over Arizona State here. So there's a guy you see. Yes, he's going to be successful if they get the touches, and he will have an impact.
Yep. Okay. Well, fair enough. You know who he kind of reminds me of a little bit? Just a little bit, without the off-field issues, is Kristen Michael, who came out last year, went in the second round to Seattle. No one thought he would go that high, but he's kind of built in a similar way. So I'll be curious to see, because it's not even a sleeper anymore. I think Kristen Michael, behind that line in Seattle, the amount of hits that Marshawn Lynch has taken.
Oh, he'll get some.
Well, I think not only get some, but, listen, I love Lynch. How can I love the Skittles beast? But, at some point he's going to get injured. And Kristen Michael, I mean, you need to have Kristen Michael in every league this year. I called him last year. I was a bit early on him, but I just think it's opportunity because I think he could fit right into that type of offense. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic, but I think Sankey could be that. I don't know if he can be he's not as explosive as Michael, but I guess you can tell I really like Kristen Michael this year.
Well, and yeah. So if you got, especially if you have a guy in front of him, Sankey might not be your number one, but if you've got a number one in front of him, who, if you kind of take, let's look at, I'm forgetting Gerhardt.
Yeah.
Gerhardt's the guy who
signed with Jacksonville.
Signed with Jacksonville, and it was being behind Adrian Peterson, and when Peterson was out for a little bit, that he got a few games. He got some good game tape on him. Or you see a guy that Michael Turner, who was there in San Diego when he picked up the contract, and he was real effective for the first 3 years there in Atlanta. And so those types, I see Sankey as being a guy that kind of lingers a bit before he breaks out.
Interesting. I think too in fantasy we're always looking for those guys that kind of go mid-round, that the opportunity's right. Because again, it's these guys it's a short-term window on these guys, and they're so important in fantasy, so you really got to take advantage. Here's a potential sleeper, and it's funny because you and I both had him on our list coming in today when we first started chatting, and that's Jerick McKinnon out of Georgia Southern, 5'9", 209. He played the kind of triple option quarterback as a junior and only became a full-time running back last year as a senior. Is he a 12 to 15 kind of touch per game guy? I mean, what's the upside on a guy like McKinnon?
Depending on where he lands, he's going to be drafted late. He's going to get drafted late, and so it depends on the guys that are already in front of him. But he's kind of got the same sort of skill set and speed as a guy. If he's played in the triple option, he can get out in space.
Right.
He's going to give you, with the right coach who can use him, he's going to get 2 or 3 touches in the passing game. He's going to get 8 to 10 early on in the running game, and from there, he can build that. He's actually, you talk about Andre Ellington.
Right.
He's a guy that you kind of see as like Andre Ellington, and my local angle, the Cardinals actually taking a couple of extensive looks at McKinnon. Because they want a guy behind Ellington.
No, I got Ellington in like all my dynasties.
Well, they want a guy like McKinnon behind Ellington should anything happen to him.
Don't stop, man. This might be your last time in here. First time guest. Okay, so we're going to get to the pass catchers in a second, but before we do, a lot of talk because St. Louis has moved down in the draft and they've done so well. I know, look, you follow the Cardinals. We were talking today again about it's a shame the Cardinals playing this division because they've got the 49ers and the Seahawks, which are both stacked teams, but the Rams have been accumulating talent, and I know it hasn't looked great yet, but it's because there's a lot of reasons why it hasn't all gelled. But you got to remember too, not everyone comes out as an impact player, as a rookie or even a second-year player. There's a lot of talent on that St. Louis team. Do they move down and keep adding to that, or do they actually for once kind of hold serve and take Sammy Watkins number 2 overall?
Well, when you look at where they don't really need to move down because they got number 2 and number 13.
Yep.
There's no need to drop down, and so they can go one of 2 ways. They can pick up their skill player in Watkins and still pick up a pretty solid tackle, which is actually what they need.
Right.
Because from all reports, they're still all in with Sam Bradford, and as long as they got Bradford, they need to protect him and give him the chance to see if he's the guy, and if he's not the guy, they still need a guy. They still need the line to protect whoever that's going to be.
You know what it was? I don't know. My assumption there is that they spent so much money because wasn't Bradford the first overall pick before they introduced the rookie wage scale?
Yes, he was, and he got $58 million guaranteed.
It's ridiculous. So what are you gonna do? But I mean, look, if I was St. Louis and I was going to make a splash and keep that second pick, I might look at Johnny Manziel, and I still don't. People have been turning me on Manziel. I don't know how I feel about that. But I still think he's a CFL quarterback. with all due respect. But I don't know. I think if I'm St. Louis, I'm going to make a splash. I'd rather replace the quarterback because you can argue Bradford hasn't had weapons, but I don't know. It's a tough situation. He had Cook last year. Tavon Austin had a couple big games, but that was more Austin kind of, dinking and dunking and then not getting tackled. So it's not like Bradford's airing out 20 and 30-yard passes.
But at the same time, what they still need to do, especially in that division, they need to build their lines. It doesn't matter if they have a quarterback. Now, Manziel might be the guy to handle a little bit more of a bad offensive line because of his mobility, but you still want, they should go boring. Truthfully, they should go boring with the tackle with one of those picks, and then go with one of the other picks. They could go splash on one way. Jeff Fisher, though, he's a defensive guy.
Yep.
He might pick up one of those guys like a Khalil Mack.
And look, I'll tell you one thing. I've been hearing stuff from some of my contacts in Toronto because there's a lot of Bills coverage going on there, obviously. And apparently the Bills are really making an effort to try and move up, possibly to that second pick, move up from the 10 spot. Probably take one of those defensive players. I mean, just from a marketing and ticket sales position, if you could have a Mack at second overall in Buffalo, the only
hometown kid.
Absolutely. Well, at least for the university. So
yeah.
I can see that being a possibility. But yeah, you're right. St. Louis, you make a good point. They do need to build up that line. So if you got to put a nickel on it today, are the Rams holding that pick or are they moving back?
I'd say they're holding.
Really? They take Robinson?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, that's interesting. And when did Robinson really pass Matthews on the tackle kind of draft chart this year?
Well, it had to have been because of the team that he was on, because of Auburn's play throughout the SEC and how you saw him play mauling defenders, SEC defenders, mind you,
SEC,
mauling SEC defenders. He has all the physical tools. He struggles in pass protection right now.
Right.
He struggles a little bit in pass protection, but he has the feet, he has the frame, and so his upside's really, really high, as opposed to Jordan Matthews, who's got the
Jake Matthews.
Jordan Matthews is a receiver, isn't he? Jake Matthews, who does everything well, and he's a boring left tackle.
Yep.
He's the left tackle you really want. But
yeah, absolutely. And look, tackles aren't sexy. Literally, whether it's from a draft perspective or how they look,
they're big guys.
Big guys, but you know what? You're the first guy that actually made that point and really kind of laid it out to me that listen, in that division against those great defensive lines, what Arizona brings, what the Seahawks bring, you got to work on that line. So okay, it's interesting. Okay, let's get to the pass catchers here while we still have time to do so. So obviously the consensus pick here is Sammy Watkins. But just quick, before we get to Sammy Watkins, is he the consensus pick, or is there any chance, there's been a lot of buzz about Mike Evans this week, any chance he kind of, jumps up?
I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't see it. The game tape is there. Everything about Sammy Watkins says he's going to be good. He's going to be really good.
You know what? We purposely haven't really done any NFL comps today, but who's the closest comparison to Sammy Watkins?
A healthy Percy Harvin.
Ooh.
Not the injured Percy Harvin.
Don't tell anyone that. My dynasty draft's coming up. No, I'm not going to get him in my dynasty draft. Really, that's interesting.
Healthy Percy Harvin. He's that type of impact player because of the speed.
You see the pipes on Percy Harvin? Like, I fell in love with Percy Harvin, man. I mean, I've never seen such a rocked up wide receiver as that guy before.
Who gets hurt so often?
I know. Okay, anyway. Sammy Watkins, obviously from Clemson, big game breaker, probably going to go in the top 5 picks. I think that's pretty fair to say. Any concerns, though, he was a product of the offense at Clemson?
That's always a concern with a lot of those skill players, but he has the one thing you can't teach.
Fast.
He's got fast.
He's got fast.
He has fast.
Fast. He's so fast. All right, good stuff. Mike Evans, 6'3", 231 out of A&M. Obviously, him and Johnny Football were spectacular last year. Only problem with him, he's not fast. He's slow.
Yeah.
But he's kind of a big possession, West Coast type receiver. Guy's going to move the chains, but those guys are also red zone threats.
Absolutely. I mean, a guy who can catch the ball, who's as big as he is, that's money.
Yeah.
That's money. And while he's not going to make these... if he's not going to get the breakaway speed, but hey, look at this. Anquan Bolden, slow.
You really got to slow.
Anquan Boldin, not fast, and he's had a fantastic career. Larry Fitzgerald, not fast, not slow, not fast. He's had himself quite a career. He's a guy who's going to win a lot of jump balls, and that's going to make a quarterback better. A quarterback that can put the ball in a general area, he's going to make him look better because they can win those 50-50 balls.
Little Vincent Jackson-esque.
Ooh, good comp.
Yeah, okay. I guess we might stick to comps. Wide receivers, I find, are easier to come up with comps for than most players. But what do I know? Okay, here's a guy that yesterday T-Hole was drooling over. I mean, he went bananas from Marquise Lee out of USC. Obviously, top recruit, really skilled, great athlete, great hands. Real question with him is injuries. He's had a bunch of them in his career at USC. Looks like he could go in the first round, maybe early second round. What's your take on Marquise Lee out of USC?
I was there at the game he got hurt. I was there at that game, and it was tragic. I mean, even for the opposing team, for the opposing team's fans, that you were just, it was terrible. Lee has NFL talent all over. He's not as fast as people wanted and hoped he would be.
Right.
But that's exactly the type now. If you look back many years back, Keyshawn Johnson, another USC guy, didn't quite have the superstar career that they wanted. Yeah. But he was still a pretty good receiver.
He was a possession receiver. They're not, what you want. They don't make you drool on Sundays when you're watching Red Zone.
But Lee, he does everything well. He does everything well.
Right. He's nowhere near as big as Keyshawn.
No.
Yeah, Keyshawn was a monster. But also, too, the draft that Keyshawn came out, there wasn't a lot going on there. Who are we going to take number one,
That was a silly pick at the end. And a solid guy. That was it.
Yeah, no, listen, you take the Keyshawn element out of Keyshawn, and he would have been. Well, he was an elite possession receiver. It's exactly what it was. Nothing wrong with being a possession receiver.
No. Nothing at all.
It's just when you watch Julio Jones, you're like, oh, that's fast.
And the hands.
Yeah.
That's.
Speaking of injuries, if he could just stay healthy.
Isn't that the case with so many of these guys? Percy Harvin, Julio Jones. These are guys that the talent is just oozing out of them. The NFL's a brutal game.
Yeah.
And
the bed sores also have them oozing out stuff.
All
right. Here's a guy, very fluid runner, great leaper, a lot of buzz around this guy. A lot of people talking they might move up to go get this guy, Odell Beckham, 5'11", 198 out of LSU. Doesn't have great breakaway speed, a bit of an inconsistent pass catcher. So why all this buzz about this guy?
The program.
The program.
LSU has been.
Should be a movie or a TV show or something called The Program.
With who plays Les Miles? No, but the LSU program has been putting out more and more. I mean, at least from my perspective, you see the Arizona Cardinals. They've got a defense full of LSU players,
right?
And so it's the product of the SEC always gets more buzz than anyone else, and he's gotten. I mean. He had good off-season work. I mean, his off-season showings were good, and that's the type of player. He's another guy that gets, which is interesting because he doesn't have quite the breakaway speed. He does get some Percy Harvin comparisons. I don't think that's quite fair. Let's say more Sidney Rice.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Well, Sidney Rice had the one good year in Minnesota when Favre, had the one good year.
But that type of comp, talent-wise, because he's got the talent, hasn't been able to put it together, and he's dangerous too. It's just he just hasn't been Percy Harvin.
Okay, do you think Philadelphia actually, which has been the buzzy rumor the last couple of days, which means it's baloney, but is there any chance that Philly moves up to go grab this guy to replace Deshaun Jackson?
Actually, what I've heard, they love a cornerback.
Okay, but look, here's my argument for the Eagles. You got Nick Foles there. You've got LaShawn McCoy in the prime of his career. You got a couple of good tight ends, a couple of good developing ones. I like Ertz. Ertz is an interesting guy. Who's going to catch the ball? Like, I like Macklin when he's healthy, but talk to me about unhealthy wide receivers. So who's going to they need wide receivers, and you don't want to draft second.
Riley Cooper.
Whatever. Riley Cooper. If you bring up Riley Cooper or the Cardinals once more, then I'm going to start fining you. You have to buy the steak tacos after the show.
So no, but Philadelphia needs guys to defend the ball. Their defense was
okay. I'm not disputing that, but who's going to catch the ball?
I'm not going to say his name.
Oh. Really? You like Riley Cooper that much?
Don't love him, but you see what he did last year.
I wasn't really going to find you, man. Maybe. Okay, here's another guy that's really interesting because he's huge. We've had fast, now we've got huge. Kelvin Benjamin, 6'5", 240, out of Florida State. And not only is he huge, he's got a massive wingspan, like bigger than like my wingspan. That's a guy who's going to be a matchup nightmare. Again, hopefully can develop into a red zone threat. But depending where he goes, he could be a red zone threat even this year because you put him in the slot with that kind of size and wingspan. I mean, who's going to defend them?
Well, and that's the thing with
You're just going to put a defensive lineman on him.
You have to put your tall mismatched tight end on him or something. I don't know. That's a guy that you really can't defend, as we've seen with the taller tight ends. When you got Jimmy Graham or Rob Gronkowski, guys that size in the red zone are a nightmare because all you kind of do is just toss the ball up in the air in their general vicinity, and as long as they've got the hands to be able to make the catch. Right.
So why isn't he getting more pub? Is it just because he's not very fast?
Yeah. The NFL's about speed.
Yeah.
Well,
listen, give me a 6'5", 240-pound wide receiver with a wingspan. I'm interested. Just saying, I'm interested.
Though I'll counter that. They're all over the NFL as 4th and 5th string receivers who come in as practice squad players.
Yeah, look, I understand, but I mean, he went to Florida State. I mean, It's not like he was, a project guy who didn't play. I don't know. Okay, I'm not gonna argue anymore. Here's a sleeper to keep an eye out in your dynasty leagues. This is a guy I've talked about to a couple people with. Shaq Evans, 6'1", 213, out of UCLA. Good athlete, good hands, good all-around player. Not sexy, but what's good about him too, he's gonna go over the middle, and guys that go over the middle. Aren't afraid to go over the middle, are more likely to get, as long as they can catch the ball, reps earlier in their career and can be fantasy relevant. So, Shaq Evans, is he a sleeper worth noting?
Yes, he is, and I'll give you another name. You talked about Andre Ellington. He's got a cousin, Bruce Ellington.
Bruce Ellington,
out of South Carolina. He's kind of Andre Ellington, but in the receiver style, because Andre is more of the running back who can play receiver. Bruce he's kind of built the same. He's 5'9". He's got 4.4 speed, and he's fearless. And he's a guy who's going to make him plays in the slot. You can get him in space, and he can make the catches. 2, make people miss and make for those big plays. He's another guy. He's getting a lot more play now. He was talked about as a 4th rounder, so I've seen him mocked as early as the 1st round. I don't think he'll go high. Late 2nd round, early 3rd round, I think is kind of the target. But he's a guy to watch out for, not because he's going to be able to play outside, but he's going to be able to play in the slot and that speed and the mismatch there on those quick plays.
By the way, I can't post this show until after my dynasty draft because I don't want all this good stuff going to the other guys. I got a lot of picks in my dynasty league this year. We're going to talk quick on tight ends because, obviously, tight ends, good ones you want to draft in your dynasty league, but more often than not, you're also going to find those guys on the waiver wire, especially the developing guys. One, obviously, we have to mention Eric Ebron, 6'4", 250 out of North Carolina. Another guy, T-Hole drooled. T-Hole just drools a lot. T-Hole's getting way too many mentions on the show today. Poke some holes into Eric Ebron.
Well, from a football point of view, he's not going to be able to. He's not an inline tight end traditionally.
Yeah.
So he's not going to do as well in terms of that. But he's basically
he's a pass catcher.
He's a receiver.
Yeah.
He's a receiver. And for fantasy, you don't get fantasy points for run blocking or for pass protection.
Unless you're in a really weird league.
And so in terms of fantasy, he's a great pickup. He's a great pickup. He's going to produce offensively because he comes from the same type of idea. It was an Aaron Hernandez pre-murder.
Allegedly.
Well, whether he was involved or not.
Yeah, let's say allegedly. By the way, our legal consultant will be on next week. Okay, but where do you think Ebron goes?
He's going to go mid-first round.
Yeah, no doubt. But how high? Who do you think takes? Where do you think he's the best fit? Because, look, I've been following the Bills for years, obviously just being based out of Toronto before recently. So I love EJ Manuel. By the way, if you're in a dynasty league and someone is not crazy about EJ Manuel, go get him, because not only is he legit, the Bills have loaded up on offensive weapons for him. There's a lot of emerging offensive skill players there, which is something you haven't seen in Buffalo in forever. But I would just love to see. I'm not a Bills fan, but I would love to see Ebron in that offense. I think he would just be such a great complement to what they got going on there.
That's a great pick right there. To give more, you've already got the receiver there. You've got a combination of Spiller if they use him.
Yeah.
But yeah, he'd be a great fit. Honestly, he'd be a great fit anywhere.
Yeah.
Anywhere where they want to use their tight ends to go down the seam or to get open space, unless they're more of a traditional line them up in line.
Right.
Anywhere. Buffalo's a good pick though.
How early could he go?
He could go as early as 10. And
no chance of going earlier than that?
I don't see tight ends going that. It's not a good value pick, just traditionally.
I just see though these GMs salivating, looking for the next Jimmy Graham, Gronkowski. Big guys, catch the ball, playmakers.
It's a possibility. I have a hard time seeing a tight end going that high just because of the history. It's just kind of like someone taking a guard. Now, Arizona did it last year. But you don't normally see those type of positions go early. It's mid to late first round.
Womack went early too last year to the Titans.
He did.
One more guy to keep an eye on, Troy Nicholas from Notre Dame.
Ooh, tall.
And you know what too? He was a defensive end that's only converted a couple of years ago. And when Eifert went to Cincinnati, to the Bengals last year, obviously opened up for Nicholas, whatever. I need a Canadian American translator, whatever. But Notre Dame's got a good tradition of developing, top quality tight ends. I'm just curious. Listen, he's not going to be fantasy relevant this year. Well, unlikely he's fantasy relevant this year. But what do you think about him just as a player? Just because I think he's an interesting, kind of all-around, interesting tight end to watch.
Well, what's good about him is that his best football is yet to come.
And I think that's...
And then that's the thing. He still has... You haven't seen the best of him from that position. In terms of a football standpoint, he has the frame and he has the ability to be the inline blocker that the position needs to be that all-around player, but he's already the target. I mean, throw it up. Who's going to match up with someone who's 6'7"?
Yeah,
there's no defenders that tall.
Yeah,
anywhere.
Lots
a few linebackers. You see a Carlos Dansby at the 6'5", but they're not going to cover.
Tall.
You can't teach tall.
Fast. Slow, but tall.
You can, huge. There are things you can have that you really can't teach. You can have fast, speed, and you can have tall.
You can't teach height.
No,
unless you get some of those like moon boots and you hang upside down. Maybe
half an inch.
All right. What's the biggest storyline tomorrow? Where Johnny Football goes?
I think it's. I think Johnny Football's good. I don't think he'll go past the first round. I think it's just the quarterbacks in general, because you've got Teddy Bridgewater, who was the consensus number one,
right,
almost for a year.
Okay,
and now there's talk he'll get drafted second day. Johnny Football's another one, but it's kind of it's all around the quarterbacks. Anytime that football is all about quarterbacks, they get the girls, they get the big contracts, and they get the buzz at the NFL draft. And so it'll be all about the quarterbacks, where they land. And the second storyline is always who's trading up, who's trading down.
Right. So what team makes the biggest splash tomorrow?
The team that makes the biggest splash.
No pressure. Don't.
They shouldn't. Cleveland's going to do it.
What are they going to do? They're not taking Manziel.
You don't think? I wouldn't be surprised at all. Who are they going to run? Brian Hoyer out there?
Yeah, although Manziel to Josh Gordon would be fun to watch, especially with Ben Tate if he can stay healthy out of the backfield. That's a really good offensive line.
Let's go the second route. Say Watkins falls back. They take Watkins, and they take Carr.
Yeah.
And then they've got Gordon, Watkins, and then a quarterback to throw to him.
Interesting. Listen, just before we wrap, a couple quick things, guys. Of course, look, You know what sucks about fantasy football or fantasy baseball or fantasy basketball or your World Cup soccer pools or whatever your pool is? Collecting the league fees.
Oh,
Isn't that the worst? That's why I quit commissioning. I left commissioning. I left the Markham Keeper League, ladies and gentlemen, because I couldn't deal with collecting from my brother-in-law. I'm talking to you, Rich. I'm just kidding. Rich paid up. But all joking aside, so what you got to do is, have you heard of sportsvault.net?
I haven't. Tell me about it.
Okay. This is where things get interesting. What they do is, it's an absolutely no-fee service. They collect all your league fees, and they redistribute it as per the league rules at the end of the year. No fees. So why would you chase down Johnny No Pay, no relation to Johnny Football, and just go to sportsvault.net. That's the first thing. Second thing is, the good people at DraftKings.com, of course, are going to be playing a ton of daily fantasy going into the football season. But starting next week, we're going to start running the daily fantasy baseball contest. Going to have more details at the end of the week. On Thursday's show, we got Gray and we got Sky. And then I believe on Friday, we've got Guru and we've got Smokey. That's right, Smokey makes an appearance. Of course, they'll be on the soon-to-be-named Razzball cam. But Jess, it was really great having you here live in studio with me, man. This was fantastic.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for bringing me in.
Hey, are you kidding, buddy? Absolutely. So, real quick, your Twitter handle is at Senor Jess Root.
Yeah.
Right?
Complex, yes.
¿Cómo estás?
Todo bien, todo bien.
Listen to that accent, eh? Todo bien. And of course, they can follow you at Revenge of the Birds, which is part of SB Nation.
Yes.
It's a great website, so if you want great local coverage, check out SB Nation. My man here in Arizona, Jess Root, has the lockdown on the Arizona Cardinals. It was crazy, actually. There's no joke. We're in here, and I'm like setting up the mics and stuff, and he's like, oh, I know who's going here. Oh, I just got this tweet. Oh, I'm like, what? So if you want plugged-in Cardinals coverage, check this guy out. If you want plugged-in local coverage, check out SB Nation. Of course, I am at Nick Capozzi, NickCapozzi. I gotta say ZZI now because I'm in the U.S., not ZZI anymore. Lots more coming up at Razzball Radio. And don't forget, last thing for football, guys. If you are watching this for football, of course, in August, we are hosting from the mobile studio. That's right. I have a 2014 Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van. It's becoming a mobile studio, and we are going to drive across America. Razzball's hosting 32 fantasy football drafts in 32 straight days in all 32 NFL cities, doing the show every day on location, 10,000 miles. It's going to be nuts.
You're going to be a tired guy.
Absolutely. You're going to come out to the Phoenix one, I expect.
Absolutely.
August the 8th in Phoenix. Get your tickets. I'll put up the link because that's the other thing, too. If you're watching this show, all our links and lower thirds, all the good-looking stuff, it's coming. It's coming, people, okay? This week, we're just learning how to make the sausage. Next week, it'll be beautiful. You get a beautiful end product. Okay. Of course, too, you just subscribe to the podcast if you don't want to watch the show. That's all I got. I'm out of here. Jess, really, buddy. Appreciate it, man. I'll have you in again in here some other time if I haven't made you hate coming in here already. Thanks, Razzballers. We will talk to you soon. We're out of here. Bye-bye.